two, one. How's it going, everyone? Mafari here. Welcome to Edapolis Radio. Today, we've been fortunate to be joined by Leslie Reed. She's a graffiti poet and a multidisciplinary artist. She has been kind enough to give her time to share about what she does, her art, what it means to her, and hopefully inspire those of you that are also seeking to cultivate your own artistic expression or start your own journey as an artist of some whatever shape, form it comes in, obviously. So without further ado, Leslie, tell us about yourself. What has brought you to the world of poetry and artistic expression?
Oh, Mafar, it's so nice to get to be with you, and thank you for this invitation. And I'm really just delighted to get to speak with you today. What brought me to art is kind of a roundabout thing. Although I was raised by a mother who was very artistic, and she made sure that I had access to my school had really good art classes, but she would take me for painting classes and there was just always crafts going on in the house. And I think I did not realize how deeply that affected me, that it was just constantly available. And so I think I had just an artistic temperament from a young age. And however, when I was heading into the world, I did um, sort of the classic American thing. So I'm calling in from Berkeley, California, but I was raised on the East Coast. I was raised in New York State. And so the corporate world was kind of the thing that seemed right. You know, I had fallen in love with art, but I felt right about using my intellectual capacities in a different way. And so the place I found my career was in philanthropy, foundations, giving
Mm.
grants, and particularly in the area of health. And so the way to get you to how did I become an artist, I have to tell you about sort of the pinnacle of that career and then the fall from that career. So I was at foundations, and particularly at startup foundations. There was a process in the US where new foundations were being created, and I just stumbled in on it. Sometimes there are just these things in life where you just land in the right place at the right time. So I got to help start up these foundations. And then over time, I started doing work on public policy with
Mm.
the foundations. I started really in California, and then I moved to a small Midwestern town, and I was part of the startup team. And I ended up creating an internal think tank on policy and how we influence policy by bringing new data, bringing new information into the discussion. And so we would meet with elected officials and business
Wow.
people and providers, healthcare providers, particularly working on healthcare. And then it really was fun. It was really fun. Like, so that's really another important part of me. But I love doing that. I worked on that in the state I was living in, and then started working with colleagues around the country, working on building, shifting things, health disparities. We were focusing on the where some people are not getting as good of care, where some people are not as healthy. We're really concerned with things like that. And then I started thinking, because a lot of times the foundations would come together for a project and then they would pull apart and say, no, we need to be known for our particular thing. And they had this maverick rather than this cooperative attitude.
Mm.
So I thought, well, I wonder what's going on in Europe, because I studied abroad, I've studied languages, and I get the sense that when you connect with people from other cultures, you can get really deep learning. So I ended up applying for this US grant called a Fulbright, which is when you're kind of at the top of your field and you're in a leadership role. A lot of times it's professors, but you can also do it like right out of undergraduate. You can do it as a postdoc, and they will sponsor you to go do a project that is in your field. So
Mm.
I got awarded a Fulbright. I got to take my whole family with me. I was the
Wow.
breadwinner in the family. I took my
Wow.
daughters. We threw them into Belgian schools, which meant that they were speaking French and Dutch.
Wow.
And so we had 8 months in Belgium, and I got to talk with leaders in foundations and nonprofits throughout Europe and talk about how they were influencing public policy. It was super cool. Oh my gosh, it was like the high point of this career. Um, and then I got home to this small Midwestern town, And I just leave some anonymity around that because it's comfortable.
Mhm.
And this, I don't know if you know of this, but you were in Canada for a long time. This Me Too situation was going on in my
Yes, yeah,
life.
yes, yes.
So it was just prior to that coming out into the public, but I had been being harassed by many men at the place where I was working, and I just kept pushing it aside and trying to do my work. Well, when I got back, some people decided they would address it while I was gone. And so the stuff hit the fan,
Mm,
and I had no control over it. And instead of the men being chastised and asked to behave or leave,
mm,
I was fired.
wow.
And I was like at the top of my game. And then I got blackballed in that small town. Like people who had invited me to advise them on this, that, and the other wouldn't even take a call from me. So I was like,
Mm,
fine, I'm going to move back to California. So
mm,
I moved back to California. And as you can imagine, it made it quite an impact on me to lose that big career, that access that I had.
mm,
Um, but you can see that, like, if I'm an artist as a child, but then I created this corporate career, there was a bit of dissonance in me.
mm,
So I'm just like planting that seed. But it really hit my family hard. It hit my marriage very hard. So by the time everybody landed in California,
mm,
things went from joyful to awful with my husband.
mm,
And it was a slow process. I probably could tell you the landmarks, but I asked for a divorce.
mm,
And that was like a huge thing. So um, the shift of the career, the divorce, and my husband was British.
mm,
And he wanted to do a kind of divorce where we would have a lot more freedom to make the decisions. And so about 3 weeks before we were going to disband the family home, he
mm,
said, I'm moving back to Britain. And I was like, okay, but I didn't want to stop him. I wanted him to be happy. And then this really shocking thing happened was my daughters decided to move with him, and they
mm,
were 18 and 15. So the older one was going to do a gap year in England.
mm,
And I thought that's really cool. That's a great experience. I really value living abroad and spending time in other cultures. It was half of her cultural upbringing was being British. So that
mm,
was really cool. But when my younger daughter told me a few days after that she was also going, she was 15 and she had decided previously to live with me. And in the US, the way things are set up is most of the time the parents have to stay close to each other so that the children can see both parents.
mm,
But I had made an agreement where I couldn't stop it.
mm,
And so my children moved. And in the sort of meantime of being in California, I had started to rebuild my career in by doing consulting. So I got a big consulting gig, and I had this summer. They left at the end of the school year. The girls went off, and I had this kind of wild, fun summer, a bit of freedom, doing a new
mm,
job, being in California, and having all this time. And then we wrapped around to the fall, and something else occurred. And that was that my mother died in November. My best friend called to tell me. And that was rough. But the thing was, she killed herself. And so my life just went into this like shock. And I continued to sort of perform in the consulting way, which was very similar to the career way. But I was, more and more I could hardly do anything but the absolute minimum.
mm,
And then my younger daughter and I got enough time to connect that I learned that it was very difficult to connect back then. There wasn't WhatsApp, there wasn't Zoom, there wasn't the ease in the
mm,
same way. And so when I finally really connected with her, she let me know she was depressed.
mm,
But she was also not just depressed, she was suicidal. And
mm,
I was like, oh, all the alarms went off because
mm,
when you have the precedent of a suicide in the family, especially a recent suicide of a close family member,
mm,
that it's dangerous, especially for young people, because they see that as an option.
mm,
So I rallied, I got off the couch and I got this cool consulting gig where I convinced them to let me use Zoom and
mm,
to go live in Britain and help them with their project in
mm,
California. And I moved to the near the beach in Britain. I'd never lived near the beach. And I was a walk away from my daughter and I was there and it was really cool. And
mm,
so I started going down to this gorgeous beach because honestly, I wasn't overwhelmingly busy. And so I got to really explore Britain.
mm,
And that beach was amazing. The waves would pound or they would be receding and making this. There was a constant noise from that. And then the wind along those white cliffs in southern England was so powerful that I couldn't even hear my own thoughts.
mm,
And right before I left California, I read about this poet called Ruth Stern. She's an American poet who passed away some time ago, but she used to hear poetry when she was on her farm as a girl, and it would come over the hills, and she would run inside and write it down because she knew if she didn't write it down right then, it would
mm,
disappear. So here I am on the beach, and it is so loud with the nature sounds that I can't even hear my own thoughts. And suddenly I start hearing these lines. I'm like, what's that? Oh, so I grab beach chalk because those white cliffs are always breaking down and dropping chalk on the shore. So I just started writing the lines onto the seawalls. And then I was like, that's going to wash off. It rains all the time here. There's tides. So I started photographing them.
mm,
And so I started writing these poems. And then I would go back to my apartment. I would work on my job. I would see my daughter. And we had a really fun fall semester, except that this other crisis hit. Her stepmother, with whom she was living, was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor.
mm,
So I've moved to Britain because my daughter has been suicidal. It's cheering her up, but it's very important that I'm there. And this is not just any year. The British system is that your last year before university, you take exams that are cumulative.
mm,
Nothing licensed in the US. So it was like really astonishing that anyone could even perform to that level. And she
mm,
had to perform to where at the end of the year in June, she was going to put out everything she'd learned for 3 years in British schools.
mm,
And I was like, "Oh my god, I have to be here. This girl is going through a lot." Um, so we're like, figuring out systems, doing things together, and then we get to Christmas time, and what happens? But my really cool consulting gig, they're like, we want you proximal. They were very intellectual. We want you nearby, and I'm
mm,
like, yeah, well, I'm staying here because my daughter really needs me,
mm,
and And so they said, "Well, we don't like being on Zoom." And so they canceled the contract.
mm,
And I'm like, "Oh, what do I do? Here I am. I'm in Britain. I'm committed to being here." And so I kept I did everything I could to renegotiate my lease, to do piecemeal work. I did other little consulting gigs, but it was slim.
mm,
So I just kept going to the beach and writing poetry. And it was kind of fascinating because when I started going to, I need a drop. Uh,
mm,
so I would go to the beach and I would write because it was the only thing that made sense. And I would pick up that chalk and a poem would come and they started to be instructive. These
mm,
poems went from being feisty, little, kind of slightly intellectual things to like, you are here for a reason. You need to be here. You are getting back to your good heart.
mm,
And I was like, wow, okay. It was really, and I needed it so much at that point. There had been so much loss, and I kept
mm,
rallying. And so the
mm,
poetry was just like soul food.
mm,
And then, you know what? The muse started following me back to the house. It was like, put this piece of paper up, take these colors, draw this. And so I started processing what was happening through the creation of these different icons. They were different angels, or they were Mary Magdalene, or they were people
mm,
that I was loving, and I was creating these images.
mm,
And then I would go back to the beach and poetry would come, and it just became unbelievably powerful. It was just this reliable thing that came into my life. And I continued to take really good care of myself. My daughter and I would go to the gym. We would eat well. I
mm,
would, I would do as much meditation as I could.
mm,
So what I see in this is that I had this auditory muse, as I told you, I call it sometimes. And she would just like, honestly, I would get to the wall and I would hear the line and I'd be like, what's next? And then it would come when I was finished writing. Or sometimes it would rush and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get this down. Anyway, this is how the graffiti poetry started. And I call it graffiti poetry because one day I was writing a poem and this man, who was an older man and a proper man, and he looked over down the seawall, saw me there about to write something. He said, graffiti. And I was like, poetry. And I wrote a poem about it, about the experience of being chastised for writing poetry. Um, and that's when it became graffiti poetry. And so the interesting thing is that I have continued to do some consulting, but more and more I'm leaning into, wow, I had an incredible transition in my life where so much loss happened, and my art informed the healing in me because I got back to the voice of my heart.
Mm,
And that's a very artistic voice for me. But you don't have to be an artist to do what I've done because our hearts are informing us when we can find the quiet. And
mm,
when we can create the lifestyle that is healthy, that allows that to come through. And so I've now turned my work to focusing exclusively on doing art and on helping people to find that inner voice through creative practices. And so I teach how to make icons. And it's not like, oh, we have to paint like Michelangelo. No, we
mm,
work with collage and quotations and things that help us, and some of them are things like memorial collages or memorial icons where it's like maybe you lost a parent. And
mm,
so you take a photograph and you add a quotation and then some things that that person loved, and you find a way to consolidate some of that grief
mm,
into a special place. And I see many other cultures have these wonderful sort of altars to the
mm,
ancestors. And I didn't understand it for a long time, but so I've got my own version of that, and I'm teaching people how to do that. And it's really helpful. It's really soothing, and it helps us to have that place we can go to where that love for that person is alive, and to know that they're sort of present because we call them
mm,
into that place through the art. Um, and then I've been teaching people also to do what you call intuitive writing, or some people might call channel writing, where you get into this quiet space and you invite the inner voice to write. And you can
mm,
do it on your computer, you can do it in a journal, and then the guidance starts to come and it begins to follow you through your day. And I find, especially if I make sure that I keep my practices going, where it's morning is meditation and prayer,
mm,
and it's not about a religious affiliation, it's about a spiritual connection to the
mm,
divine, which might be nature, it might be a
mm,
deity that you were raised with, it might be one that you became, fascinated with when you grew up. But
mm,
meditation and prayer and taking care of the body through good, drinking water, not too much alcohol, drink, exercising and getting out in nature. So all of these things are that balance, that allows the voice to be clear, and then consciously cultivating the voice of that auditory muse. And I have to say, I do know that this is a huge gift. I'm so grateful that I have this auditory muse who, she's kind of funny. She follows me around, occasionally I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to get my phone out. Like, I'll be here in Berkeley, I have a fence up near some redwood trees and some other beautiful local trees. And when you leave sort of the downtown Berkeley din, you get away from the university and you head up into the hills. At this particular place, you make a turn, you walk along these redwoods and up these stairs, and there's a fence there. And it's so quiet that it's like the feeling of that beach. And so I have over 70 poems that I write there. But my muse is funny because sometimes I'm walking there and I know that I'm probably heading there to write a poem, and she won't stop until I like have to type in the first three lines, or I'll be saying them to myself over and over and over because they're the cue to the rest of the poem. So that's kind of what happens. And what I'm starting to do right now, Mafaro, is that I'm blending the poetry into artwork. So I've started to do it. Um, I could show you one, but I don't know how impactful it would be.
No, go ahead. The space is
Okay.
yours. The space is
All
yours.
right. So I've been doing this for quite a while, and I'll show you the one that I made about my mother. It's an icon, um, that memorial icon, but it includes a poem. One second. Let's see if I can get it here to you.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
this is her college photograph,
She's incredibly
and
beautiful, by the way. I can see
oh,
yeah, oh man,
she
that's
was
just,
really beautiful, a really special woman. And one day I found this people sometimes will walk by a garden and pull the flower off and drop it on the ground. So I found this flower on the ground and then I wrote a poem about it. And so over time I realized that what I wanted to do was I wanted to create an icon about my mother. And so I painted that because that was the what I did with the flower. And when I was a girl I used to pick black-eyed Susans for my mother and we would look at butterflies, and I happen to be really fascinated by the angelic presence. So
mm,
I have a little angel that I've been drawing, and that's on there. And
wow.
it is a place I can come to, and I think that if I read this poem, I will probably cry. So I think I'm gonna
No.
hold off on reading the poem, but I can read you the one that was pivotal that I had in England. So anyway,
Wow.
this is what I'm teaching people to do is to make make something that creates that sacred space for themselves. And this is
Mm,
my poem, but you could have a poem that just resonated with your mother or with you, and these could be collage
mm,
images that come out of magazines, and so I'm working with that.
wow.
It's really
Powerful.
powerful.
No,
Yeah. And so if you
um,
want to hear a poem you have to tell me because I can get one from across
no.
the way. um
Um, you're incredibly special, Leslie. I mean, I had questions, but it's almost as if you've just kind of flown through them. You've just kind of taken us on this journey, sharing so much about your life so openly. And you're an incredibly strong woman. To
Thank you.
go, to go through what you've gone through with, with the level of strength that you have, and having found something new from a really tough loss. It's incredible. It's incredible. And the gifts that you've ascertained from it and how you've really cultivated happiness. Because a lot of people, we go through these tidal shifts in our life. It's really difficult. It's difficult to find the next thing. But it's just incredible how
Yeah.
you've done it. It's incredible. It's just, I mean, I know we spoke briefly before, but now just hearing it, the full kind of, just the journey from this lens is incredible. So, um, I guess I was going to let you continue on where you left off. And then,
Okay.
if it feels necessary to answer the question, I will, but you can go ahead.
All right. Thank you. And um I appreciate the recognition of my strength, but I think that we all have a lot of strength. And I also, I think that it was very important in my process to go to some spiritual ideas.
Mm,
And for me, I think that we all have kind of a mission,
mm,
and I think that my mission was really to shift the patterns in my family.
mm,
and I've learned that my mother's suicide is a part of a larger pattern among the women in my family.
mm,
And um and and then I know that the things that propelled that, sort of on the masculine side of the family, those are patterns too. And
mm,
something that my poetry taught me was that, we have these choices in life, and we can go through that revolving door of like, I want to be the wild guy, I want to be you know um the always recognized woman. We can make poor choices. Well, I want to drink,
mm,
right? Like
mm,
I want to go out and party, but they can spin us downward. And
mm,
so I think that I've been able to see that a lot of what has propelled me, um, that has propelled the difficulties in my life has been about these patterns. And
mm,
so I'm really about breaking patterns, deeply about breaking patterns down the generation. And I'm still working through that. But um, I think that, the idea that I've pulled myself out is like, that's kind of what I want to teach, is that we can find that transition. And what a lot of times, what all those hardships are, they're the training for
Mm,
like our deepest calling.
mm,
And that we go, we like, I just keep working on it. And in meditation, I'm given the gifts of the healing by
mhm,
showing up for the healing.
mm,
And so now I'm like stepping out to where I feel like I've undone a lot of where I got caught in patterns of my own.
mm,
Um, and and so I'm stepping out into this joyful place. And a huge part of this whole thing is about forgiving, because we're all caught to some degree in generational patterns.
mm,
And some of us pull out, but we're never perfect. And
mm,
so we're always going to make mistakes with our children, or we're going to make poor choices. We have to forgive ourselves, and we have to understand that the people that raised us and the people who are around us, for instance, the men who harassed me, well, in the
mm,
US, I'm sure that it's longer than this, but as I look at US history, in the 50s and 60s, it was absolutely condoned that men treat women like objects in the office, and that it was absolutely fine. It was in movies, it was in humor, it was in everything. It was fine. If you wanted to chase a woman around and pinch her in the office, corner her, that was supposed to be funny. Well, for a woman, it's not anything like funny. She might laugh, but it's that laugh of self-defense,
mm,
of fear. And so I understand that men are making one of those choices to step into the, I'm going to be one of the old boys and I'm going to be in control, right? And they step into that revolving
mm,
door, and it gets worse, and they are pulled away from themselves. And
mm,
so it's about stepping out of being a victim and
mm,
being forgiving. And
mm,
there is something to calling these things out, calling out patterns. But we have to go beyond calling out patterns and saying you're bad and you people did this, into like our own power and into forgiveness, so that we can really create something in the world.
mm.
So that, I mean, that's a lot of what I've had to do, because I was given, or I called in as a spirit, I called in enough of a story that it's like, it was like, do you want to stop? Do you want to not live? Do you want to just like grind down to nothing? Or do you want to live? Okay, well then, if you want to live, because you still have daughters, you still
Mm,
have passion, you're still
mm,
creating art and poetry, then forgiveness is necessary. And starting to call out the patterns of stepping out of victim and saying this stuff's not appropriate, but I'm also not going to spend my life standing on soapboxes saying you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, and men do these horrible things.
mm,
Because women play into those things,
mm,
and we have to learn not to play into those things, so they start to disappear from our reality. And
mm.
that's been one of the most fascinating things, is that I found I can really live in a way that I'm surrounded by this loving, supportive environment. The more I claim it for myself, the more I'm willing to heal, the more I'm able to just really live in a beautiful way.
Wow. It's a lot. It's a lot. I've actually never had a podcast like this, where you just take over and it just I can't really explain what this experience has been like. It's been incredible. Just sharing this whole process, and what it's looking like now and what it's been like before. It really does leave you quite speechless. And it's not that I've run out of things to say, but no, I guess what I was gonna ask is, would you one is because obviously we have, unfortunately, because of time constraints and everything and scheduling, I know we ran in quite deep, but I did want to ask, how can people, there are two questions, three questions I'll ask. And then, so the first one is, how can people reach out to you, firstly, if they want to just begin that journey? Because I feel there's something that you figured out that maybe someone could definitely benefit in, area of confusion that someone can have kind of rectify just by maybe speaking to you. That's the first question. The second question is, Actually, there are four questions. Sorry, did I say there are four questions? The second one is where
Can we
can
do them
people?
one at a time so I don't forget?
Okay, first two and then the last two are correlated. Second one is where can people access your poetry if they'd like to read? I know
Okay.
you, yeah.
Right. Okay. So the best way to reach me right now is on Instagram, and I'm at Leslie, Leslie underscore Reed, Reed, and then underscore art, Art. So Leslie Reed Art, and you can send me a message there. Right now, I have mostly photographs of nature up. I have a little bit about my poetry, but more is coming. And I do coach people. So I coach individually, I do classes, and I really help people to find a way to move forward. And so I would love, to work with anybody who is interested, and love to have people follow me. And there will be more and more of my art coming out. I'm finally learning how to do that. I've been rather shy about it because it's been very personal.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
more I integrate the images with the poetry, I think the more I'm it's really for public, it's for the public, as opposed to these really deeply healing pieces that I've
Mm.
been working on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I will put the links in the description and in the video as well in the final edit.
Thank
Um,
you.
and the last question, I feel like this is probably a good one. So usually, I always ask the guests that come onto the show, what are their words of wisdom and advice for audience listening in? But today I thought I'd change it around and I'd ask, is there a piece of poetry that you've written that you feel the audience should maybe uh, listen to today? So a poem that you feel is you could share with the audience that, it's just a kind of one of those ones. I know you can also give a word of wisdom, but I feel like a poem would really be good.
I'd love to do a poem, and I have to go get it.
No, no,
Can you pause
no,
things?
no,
All
no
right, so
worries.
I'm gonna have to get it on my phone. I should have queued this up, but I know the exact one that I think would be fun to share. So hold on.
Please do. No worries.
All right. Now it's the trusting the muse to help me find this poem
No,
in
take your
my
time.
phone.
It'll really be an honor.
Okay. All right. So um, my poems are very short too. I wanted to let you know.
No, no problem at
Um,
all.
okay. Because you got to fit them on a seawall, and so um, or on a like the narrow piece of a fence, right? Um, so yeah. Uh, ah, I have time to do this. I hope you aren't like
No,
super rushed.
no,
Okay.
not at all.
All right. Okay. This is the one I think this really would be really sweet to share as a wrap up. So I've titled it Regather, Retwist, and I am reading it from where I've got it on my telephone here. So Regather, Retwist. Allow the snarled ball. Sorry, start again. I'm glad that you have that editing capacity. Okay. Regather, retwist. Allow the snarled ball of yarn that is you to unwind, to untwine, to fall asunder to the beat of your good heart. I will regather, retwist, right and strong the stuff of you which I made to begin with.
And if you don't mind me asking,
I felt so soothed when that came.
yeah, I feel it's beautiful. And you know what, it's actually weird. Maybe, I don't know, you just tapped into, I guess, the energy of things, but it really has it's what's been happening, at least in my own personal life and own healing journey. What you actually shared kind of aligns with the whole process that has kind of been manifesting. I don't know, it's weird to share. I guess coincidence, or maybe I don't know, but
Yeah.
um, it's incredible. It I don't know how you did that, but I don't know, for those that do tune in, perhaps it may also resonate with what you're going through or what process you're kind of coming to in your life. But it was beautiful. And so I was gonna ask, when did you write that?
So this one I wrote June 1st, 2022. Yeah.
And okay, I mean, wow, was it a specific time in your life when some type of inner healing and inner unpacking was happening, or
Yes. Really, since I lost that job in 2008, it's been a long, slow process of healing. And at one point, I identified myself as this gnarled ball of yarn. And I was like, I have to rely on life to
hmm,
unsnarl it because I don't know how to undo it. And
hmm,
so I was in the continued unsnarling of myself. And the poetry, the way it speaks to me is it soothes my heart so deeply. And I've
hmm,
learned that people who read it on the fence find the same. Like it was helping people get through the shutdown. I've learned. I was
hmm,
like, oh, okay. But I think what was going on then was the continued need to surrender, to
hmm,
just let life reconfigure me, knowing
hmm,
that the essence of me is good and is
hmm,
created by life, was put here for a purpose,
hmm,
but that I might feel really snarled up, and if I want to control it and say like it has to be this, then I'm not going to get there.
hmm.
So that, yeah.
Oh, no, Lizzie, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. You're very, very, very um, I don't want to use it. I hate saying it, but like special individual, because always, but you're definitely kindred soul, and it's translated into your
I know.
art.
I was so excited to talk to you. I was like, I like this kid. It's just like my buddy. Oh my gosh.
No,
Across the world.
no, no. It'd be good to have you on again at some point in time. I know you have what you're working on, and obviously we got to get this podcast going somewhere as well. We gotta let it hopefully grow in ways that it's meant to grow and see. But again, it's really. I mean, I had quite like I had a whole list of questions here, and at some point, as I listened to you speak, it just dissolved and just became, yeah, it literally just dissolved. And I guess that's the magic of what you bring. So thank you so much, Desi. Take care of yourself, and it's been really good.
Yes, it's been really good. And I will link you into my Instagram and everything once you get this all set, so that people know that that's there and know about your voice and your leadership and your
Uh,
ability to create a very safe and loving space for people to be themselves with you.
no, thank you so much.
I wish you well in everything and
You
look forward to
too.
hearing from you soon.